mug. Well, good evening, folks. I am Sean.
And I am Dave.
And this is
Barstools
and Bandtalk, the complete maritime music bucket list. We have a fun one for you tonight. I'm really excited. We tracked this guy down.
Yeah.
A lot of people that will remember this gentleman. One of the funniest guys I've ever met. And he's going to have some great stories here. Dave, you want to tee him up?
Sure. You might remember him from, I got thinking back to Secretary's days, below the Misty Moon, where they would have matinees and you see the Dinosaurs play. And the lead singer of the Dinosaurs and many other things with Gaudet. And here he is in living color, Gaudet. Da 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 da
da da da da. How's it going?
Good, brother.
Thanks for having
me on.
Yeah, we can hear you great. So, Al, just before we started this, we teed you up. So, you were a familiar face, an awful lot of people that frequented the Misty Moon as secretaries. So, you were. But it's weird. It usually go by day you're this, by night you're that, but by night you were, I believe, the head bartender at the Moon, if not the head guy, one of the most important ones. And by day, you were the lead singer in the Dinosaurs. So
I was.
Your face.
At one point, actually, I was the head bartender at the balcony bar upstairs. Do you remember the upper level? That's where all the cool cats hang out.
That's right, I hung out.
Yeah. I was a waiter when I was downstairs. And at one point, Jeff got me to DJ 1 or 2 nights a week, usually on Monday or Tuesdays, to let the main DJ have a couple of nights off. So at one point, I was singing with the Dinosaurs, which kind of eventually became the house band at the Moon, bartending, DJing, and I went back to Dal in there at some point. So yeah, I was pretty busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And drinking like a fool too.
Yes.
Of course.
Al, so tell us about the Dinosaur band.
So a lot of people in Halifax.
Well, it's funny. It's funny because I don't exactly remember, and I'm sure it's got something to do with brain cells, but I don't exactly remember how or when like the first practice was, or if it was just we were jamming around. If it wasn't for James Albert and Gary Potts, do you remember Gary Potts and James Albert?
Yep.
James was the guitar player, Gary was a drummer. I know that we found that there was back in the old days, back in the early 80s, that Zeller's building, which was the Moon, up on the 3rd floor, was this cavernous, empty concrete space that somehow got taken over by us. And we started horsing around, and we needed another guitar player. We needed this. And I remember Irene Robichaud was around at the time, and she was doing some part-time bartending at the Moon as well. It was a haven for a lot musicians that were getting. I had Eastern Central Canada, U.S. Eastern Seaboard, and the family, the Pangiatakos brothers. You don't want to be singer anymore. You come work for me. You good boy. And so the next thing you know, I was waitering at the Misty Moon. But I digress. Anyway, I don't know when it was, what year we started doing that, but so we just started, just horsing around on the 3rd floor of the Misty Moon. And I don't know if we had any intentions of performing or anything like that, but it ended up at one point we were all working at the Misty Moon. All the members of the band at one point were working at the Misty Moon. So it kind of just morphed into the house band. And we couldn't seem to get through a song without making mistakes. And of course, the more mistakes we made, the more we laughed. And we thought, hey, we got something here. And we got to play whatever we wanted to play. And that's where it started. And there was a guy by the name of Brant Myers at James. He started doing sound for us. And Brant, I think it was his cousin, was the first original bass player. We went through people like crazy. I can't remember how long Gary was playing drums, but then the monster of rock, the one and only Rob Smith, came on board and became a drummer. He was too much drummer for that little band. That's how good he is. And Peter Christmas, who we used to call affectionately, he was the one that came up with this name. He became the Micmacosaurus, Peter Christmas. So we all had I was Allosaurus, of course, but I can't remember what James was. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. We opened up for a lot of bands at the Moon, for a bunch of guys that were half court and intoxicated on various different levels. We got to open up for an amazing amount of bands, probably because we were free. We just drank, and that's all we did. So.
Al, to be fair though, I mean, you were a great singer though. You were a great singer that, you fronted that band. It was a great band. It really was.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I never considered myself a great singer. I considered myself a frontman, I guess. I got to get one of those mugs.
Aren't they great?
I want a T-shirt too, but.
And
I'm sure a lot of other viewers do too. But I just considered myself a frontman. I had a lot of fun when I was playing. I remember when back in the days of the working class, when I took over for Francine Shea. She was the original singer for Working Class. It was a band from Dartmouth. I don't know if you remember them.
Yes.
And they were looking for a male singer. They wanted to go in a different direction. And so I tried out for them. And that was when it was my first year in Halifax. So that would have been probably 1981, I think, maybe, when I got to Halifax via Prince Edward Island. Yeah. So it's been around. It's been a long time. But the Dinosaurs, man, they couldn't get anybody in at the Misty Moon for their 4:00 happy hour for a long time. And I remember James saying, why don't you just let us get up and play? And, no holds barred kind of thing. We'll see what we can do. By the end of it, we had packed the Misty Moon on Sundays with a bunch of, metalheads and stuff like that, our kind.
Yeah.
And people stayed. People stayed all night. So I think that was the beginning of it.
Well, because the only other thing that I think you could maybe compare to is when the Swell guys used to do their matinee at Pedal.
Absolutely.
And I remember kind of starting there, and it was like, they're fun. And then I go up and you guys, Peter, because I played in a couple bands with Peter Christmas, and he used to do the Ace of Spades by Motorhead, and it was just
absolutely. Yeah.
So, we had Jeff Palmer on. You may have seen it. One of the things Jeff talked about was the staff, and he just talked about how great staff was at the Moon, how you guys were a great team. It was just I get the feeling, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I get the feeling that of everything Misty Moon it's probably the staff he missed the most. Talk about that a little bit, because I remember some great folks that used to work there.
There was some great people. He was absolutely correct. It was a cavernous place to play, a place to work. We were tremendously busy all the time. We were put under a lot of pressure by the owners. He was under an extraordinary amount of pressure to get people in the club, soak them from as much as money as possible. It was a dog-eat-dog world. We had competition from the Palace and Rose's Cantina down the street. So Jeff was under a lot of pressure to turn a dime, and he did. He did a really good job. There was, I walked into what was already a family, I think, in the middle of 1986 when I decided to get off the road. I walked into, and I noticed it the first night that I worked. I was scared to death the first night that I worked there. I remember it distinctly. It was like the dead of winter. It was probably February on a Tuesday night. There was nobody in there anyway. And I felt like I was going to walk in there and, oh yeah, here comes another ex-musician that Jeff's given a job to, and I have to split my tips with this guy. He doesn't even know how to hold a tray properly. And that was the thought process that I was thinking of when I walked in there. And I couldn't have been more wrong. It was like a family, and it got expanded upon. Everybody looked out for each other, and that was not only Jeff to the waiter, bartender, the bouncers that worked there. You would go to other places in the city, and the bouncers would be aggressive. Do you remember the old Network days on Dresden Row when I used to play there? They had the entire St. Mary's football team working there as bouncers. But things were really cool. And it was like that at the Misty Moon, too. I'm sure that it's changed over the years. But so everybody worked in tandem. We had the bus boys were schlepping, like, they'd come through with those dollies, like about 50 flats of beer, like in the middle of a set change, when BTO was playing or something like that. And it was like the parting of the Red Sea, because everybody knew that beer has got to get in the coolers because I'm not drinking warm beer anymore. It was really cool. And you know what? The customers were fantastic too. Yeah. I mean, that's what sold the place. That's why I worked there for 4 years.
A lot of people, if they didn't go there, it's really hard to explain the vibe of the Moon, because it was there wasn't a lot of fights. If you're a musician, you went there. It was a safe place. Nobody bugged you. It was a cool spot. Bands, it was 3 levels, but 2 good levels of awesome sight line stage. It was just a great place. And the staff were awesome. I mean, I know somebody that played there. I mean, I was always taught, if you don't get along with the staff, you're fucked. It's not going to work for you, right? And I thought the staff was always, super. I just remember you back, and you were just always so funny. I mean, it was just like, you always had to watch what you said around Al Gaudet, because he would turn it on you.
Exactly.
I've had to learn to keep my mouth shut for the last 30 years.
Oh my God.
In my current job. Yeah, it's a good thing they can't read my thought bubbles, but
well, and to talk about your current job, because I remember when you decided that that's what you were going to do, and I remember, and you probably won't remember this, but I do, because one of my weird superpowers is a good memory. But I remember having the conversation with you about, I think you were taking French because you had to own up on your. So I lost touch with you, and then I was talking with somebody that said, "Yeah, I was just on this flight. This flight attendant was the funniest freaking guy," and I was like, "That's got to be Al Gaudet." The guy's like, "That was Al Gaudet," and I tell you, it was a DJ at Q104 that he was on the flight, and
oh my God,
it was hilarious.
It might have been J.C. Douglas. Yeah, that was. I mean, when I got hired back in the spring of 1990, I'd already done about 3 months of intensive French training at Dell. And I had gone through several French interviews, and I finally got it on the 3rd time.
Nice.
So it didn't come easy to me, even though my last name was Gaudet. I mean, I grew up in Newfoundland at PEI, so, take that for what it's worth. But
not a whole lot of French there.
Not a whole, well, there's a bit, but not a lot.
Yeah.
But you know what the funny thing about it was? I remember the woman. This was 30 years ago. I was at the final interview that I was at the airport in Halifax Airport, and it was Air Nova back then, if you remember that.
Yeah.
And which was wholly owned by Air Canada. And I remember the woman said to me, she had a list of questions, and we had already done all the psychobabble and level 1 and level 2, and I was on the last thing, so it was my job to lose, kind of thing. And she said, now I want to ask you a couple of problem-solving questions. She said, and I see that you're working. She had this list in front of her. I was probably about the 30th person that she had spoken to that day. And she said, so, Mr. Gaudet, she said, I see that you work at the, oh dear Jesus, you work at the Misty Moon as a bartender? And I went, yeah.
Don't say tabernacle. Don't say tabernacle.
And I said, like, is that a problem? And she goes, these next 3 questions I have are absolutely irrelevant. And she went, past. When can you start? And I was like, I thought it was some kind of joke, because she said, basically, she said to me later, she said, I figured problem-solving situations with irate passengers, intoxicated passengers on board an aircraft. How would you deal with situations like that and maintain, a professionalism and an upbeat attitude? And she said, I see that you work at the Misty Moon. And she said, I've been to the Misty Moon. I probably have seen you at the Misty Moon. And I didn't need to ask those questions. And I said, okay, cool. So the Misty Moon had a reputation for being a very scary place for people that had never walked into the place.
Yeah.
But it also had a reputation of being a huge, big family party pit.
Yep.
And that's what it was.
You nailed it right there, Al, because I think about it, and I think about my time, like, from our time, like Sean and I, like from 86 on.
Yep.
The Misty Moon was, it was just like that. It was like a home away from home. It was very family oriented. You felt safe. I never felt like I was going to get in trouble. I mean, I never made trouble. But I never felt like I was going to get in trouble. You know what I mean? I thought people had my back, and it was just a really, I don't know, it was a real environment that ensued just happiness, and like people just were liking the music, and they were liking the environment, and there was never any grief, never any problems, and people
never any problems at all.
No.
You always felt like no matter what time of the week, what night, who was playing, you always knew that if, even at late at night, if you were the last, like all the other bars closed, and then it always filled up between 2 and 3 a.m. was some nights, the busiest part of my night. That's where I made all my tips was, between 2 and 3. But you always knew that you would know somebody when you walked in, even by yourself. There's a lot of places to this day that you can't go into a bar by yourself and feel comfortable.
No.
But you always could at the Moon.
Exactly.
I didn't even feel that way at the Palace. And I worked a couple of shifts every once in a while up there. It was a different vibe, different clientele. But the Moon, you could always go in there by yourself, and within 2 or 3 minutes, you'd be talking to somebody that you knew.
Yep, no question.
And that was really comforting, and fantastic music too.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because you would have seen some incredible, we'll call them Halifax historical music events that would have taken place when you were there. So talk about that.
Sir. Yes, sir. I got a chance to meet some really funky people that normally you would not. Like I got to meet the drummer for Nazareth before he passed away, and to me, growing up as a kid in Newfoundland, rocking out to the Hair of the Dog, and that was something special to me. Sitting down and talking to the guys from, the guys from BTO, Jeff Healy, God rest his soul. I mean, that was insane. That, he played a couple of times. Remember they did the Much Music special? Yeah. From the Misty Moon. I think that was the hottest, like physically the hottest I had ever been in my life in a confined space. Like it was, people were coming up to the bar. I don't know how many hundreds upon hundreds of people we exceeded past the fire code that night during that filming. But because of all the lighting for Much Music, to film the concert, it was incredibly hot in the club. Yeah. And, I remember that kind of thing, but I remember the couple of times that he played there before, and he used to play downstairs at Secretaries. And of course the elevator shaft ran up and down because that's where we get our food from. And so you got to know the guys, right? There was just 3 guys, You know, I think one of the guys was from St. John. I can't remember.
Yep.
I'm really bad with names, but
Even the drummer.
so things like that, like Nazareth, BTO, Jeff Healy, oh my God, Rick Emmett, and all these different bands that would come in that were playing at the Metro Center or other clubs that would always come in
Always.
when they were finished to get up and jam with whatever band was on stage.
Yeah.
And it didn't make any difference if it was just a local band, and I don't mean just, but if it was a local band or a band from Toronto, like a circuit band or a recording artist, you would get these people come in and be like, you know, at that time, like ask Eddie Duggan about the time that the guys from Metallica, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, these are all like the old war stories, right? It's incredible. Like oh man, good memories.
Well, and one of the things, Al, that is starting to become a little bit of a theme with this is the people that never got to go to these places and trying to explain to them what it was like, because they're not around anymore. And obviously the music experience in Halifax has maybe taken a little bit of an uptick, and hopefully with Argyle Street being what it is, it'll get better. But people don't understand what it was like to be able to basically have your choice of bars, your choice of entertainment, your, start out at 10 o'clock at night, and, by 3:30, you're still in there. I mean, I remember moving to Toronto, and we did the old, we'll stay and drink till 12.
Absolutely.
And then we went to the gas, one beer, and it was shut down because it was 1 o'clock. Like, people just, if you were to, I guess, give these people that have been watching this stuff that hadn't experienced that a little sort of a what or a tutorial, what would you tell them about this? Because I mean, I just remember it was a huge part of my life, and it wasn't all about drinking and getting in trouble. It was a lot of really good, good
Al,
fun.
what time did you get home? What time did you get home on a normal night?
When I was working, at one point I was working 6 nights a week. Well, I didn't really call it work though. But to answer your question, if it was the beginning of the week, I would probably be home by about 3:15. Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, I was walking home and the sun was coming up, because, we took our time. There were routines and things that we had to do after the doors closed that nobody else were supposed to know. But I mean, we sat around and we socialized. And of course, we were full of piss and vinegar at 4 o'clock in the morning. And it took us a good hour to clean the bar up. And then we could sit down and we would count our tips and stuff like that and socialize with each other, because quite literally it was too busy to even talk, other than we need 16 more flats of beer 5 minutes ago, make it happen, that kind of thing. Yeah. So that was where we did our socializing, basically. And ironically, what people didn't know was the bands that were playing that night would stay in their dressing rooms until excuse me, people cleared out, and they would come in and sit down and join us too for a cocktail, unbeknownst to the Halifax Police Department. But anyway, so that was the good part of it. So yeah, there was many mornings that I didn't live too far from the downtown core. I was up on Cogswell anyway at that point. So to walk home, many times the sun was coming up when I was coming home. And you didn't even count your tips until probably once a week. You would just throw your cash in the nightstand drawer, sleep, you wake up in the afternoon and do your thing, and go shopping, get groceries and stuff, and then you get ready for another night shift. It was a way of life, actually. Yeah. And it's interesting because over the last 30 years, I've been stationed across the country. I spent some time out west in Vancouver and Calgary, and I agree with what you're saying. When you were living in Toronto, I was in Toronto for several years, in Montreal, and it's a different beast. It's like you said, you go out for a bite to eat, you go out for for dinner and drinks, and but nowadays it's not. In some of these places, it's not live entertainment that draws you. It's just the fact you're going out for a couple of drinks, and you're more interested in who's going to call the Uber to get you home, basically. Yeah. But back then, like I'm telling my 17-year-old son the same stuff. I mean, of course, he's not going to nightclubs or anything, but I would tell
So
him
far as you know.
stories of us. Well, he's too busy working out all the time. He's a bit of an athlete, so
Good.
excellent. But he would ask me, like, what it was like to, like, spend 100% of your time was music, because I didn't consider schlepping beer and drinks and trays of shooters as work. It was just a means to an end kind of thing.
Right.
You were just spending time with family, and fortunately, the harder you work, the more money you make. Yeah. And so that was a good lesson I've always taught him. But to have your life for so many years filled, 100% filled with music all the time, and to have some play with that is just, this generation doesn't get it. They don't. No. I feel bad for them because unless you're living in a really large city and, not taking the COVID situation, taking that out of the equation. But under normal situations, you have to, let me put it this way. Do you remember back in the days when even the smallest bars in downtown Halifax, if you didn't have a live act, you couldn't get anybody in the front doors?
Yep.
Do you remember that?
100%.
Like little tiny places, even out Clayton Park, remember the old Copper Penny and
Yep.
all over the place. The Village Gate when I first came to Dartmouth. I mean, like places like that. There was a tap room down by Burnside that really had no reason for anybody to be there except for really good food. Yeah. And they had fantastic bands like Oakley and John Geddes and the guys would be playing there. Right. You couldn't get people to go to your bar unless you had live entertainment. That's right. And so that was like a factory of spewing out these, and what I consider some of the best musicians in Canada have come out of Halifax, like battle hard,
Amen,
road
brother.
hard, you know what I mean?
They do.
And they're still around. You guys are still around. We're all still here.
Well, it's funny because I talked, Donnie McKinnon is still at it. Donnie works at the Ale House.
Yes. Yeah.
Donnie started when, Dave and I were in high school, and, he's still at it. We talk about this all the time about how, the kids today just don't understand it. I get a two-part question for you, Al.
Yeah. Sure.
Was it a good living back in the day? And B, do you miss it?
I've always been a firm believer that you take things as they come to you, and you make the best out of it. And when things change in your life, some people call it maturing or just aging or moving on. I don't point fingers. I don't make any distinction there. I've enjoyed every aspect of my life. I mean, I just hit 30 years flying with Air Canada. And I still didn't have enough seniority to hold on to my job.
Right.
Mind blown, but I've enjoyed 30 years.
Yeah.
But I'd be lying to you if I said there's not a day that goes by that I don't, I hear a song, I'm in the car going out to the airport, or I've had people stop me in the airport in Toronto or Montreal and go, "Where did you say you're from?" "Halifax." "You look really familiar."
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. And 9 times out of 10, it's like, "You used to play at the Misty Moon," or "I used to play, you came to my town and played at the wherever," right?
Yeah.
And I because I got that shit-eating grin, I guess. One guy said to me one day in a business suit, he said, "I recognize that shit-eating grin." And he said, he said, "It'll come to me by the time the flight's over," and he figured it out. So yeah, there's not a day goes by that I don't miss singing. And it's one of those things, if I only knew then what I know now.
Yeah.
I joke with I still keep in really close touch with one of my best friends, Tom O'Brien. who was the drummer in Working Class, and he went on to drum with Drama and Peter Ettinger and the Boys. You know, I said to Tom, I said, it's taken me 30 years of maturing, but I can finally, you know, sing a song on key, you know, because I always used to sing. I used to overcompensate. Well, it's true. I used to overcompensate by, you know, being the mouthpiece and trying to be silly and stuff like that, because I never really had the confidence that I thought I was a really good singer. I thought everybody was better than me, and I wasn't. You know,
I'm gonna go on record
so,
now. I remember Al Gaudet. He was a good singer. He can say what he wants. I get it. I understand.
You know, you're always your own worst critic,
very
right?
good singer.
You're always your own worst critic. So
Absolutely, I understand.
I am guilty of that.
I get it.
I was fortunate enough to go on to a second career where I flew for the first 10 years, and I garnered a kind of a reputation for being, I know this will come as a shock to you, for being somebody that is, you know, blessed with the verbal diarrhea. So they suggested that I might want to try the training department. So lo and behold, I spent a good 9 years. I was flying as well, but I spent a good 9 years melding the minds of all these junior flight attendants. And of course,
I love you do this.
Taken 4.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So after I taught them how to put out fires and evacuate airplanes, I would regale them of about 2 weeks of my old rock and roll stories. And I got away with it. For
I get it every time I fly WestJet. I kid you not. And because their flight attendants are like kind of. I always say these guys need to see Al Gaudet, because I tell you, they're poking at it with a stick compared to this man. Honest to God, every time I just flew to Toronto. And the guy that I was with, I said, man,
bad squirrels.
Because I have at worked with over the years in training as well as flying. And the running joke is when people say, I hear it all the time, dude, you're really funny. You should be working at WestJet. My first reaction, I've already got a job. Thank you very much. Or between you and me, I'm not back in province. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I'm afforded where I work. I choose to work out of Halifax now, so I'm just doing domestic stuff. Well, I'm laid off right now, but I'm just doing domestic stuff, and it's because of that same kind of a family. These are a small, eastern central Canada, maybe the odd trip out to Vancouver or something. But these with are the same kind of people. They got your back, loud, and I think that kind of thing was the same thing at the Misty Moon too. You know,
that's awesome.
Because it whatever comes around goes around, kind of thing.
Yeah. We're doing the last couple minutes now, Al.
It's the same kind of thing that I find. Yeah. What's that?
I said we're down to our last couple of minutes, so let's just kind of cap off if we can.
We have to freeze.
Oh yeah, you only got 40 minutes, right?
Yeah, we used to freeze them because we're like no budget. I blame Sean.
No problem, man. I got to put a shout out to my dinosaur friends. So
yes.
Like there was, you guys know who you are, but showed up all the time and listened to our crap. Well, I mean, it was good crap. I mean, everything from Ziggy Stardust to, you know, like Van Halen and Metallica and Zeppelin and all that stuff. But I mean, if it wasn't for like James Albert, Gary Potts, Rob Smith, Steve Zatt, Peter Christmas, Irene Robichaud, the list goes on, the people that we had playing. I mean, if it wasn't for those type of people, that was such it was such a fun way to finish my career as a quasi-musician, working at the Misty Moon, one of the most popular bars in Canada, Eastern, and it was a great thing. It was a great time, and I do miss it all the time. And I wish there are times that I would go back and answer, and I didn't answer your last question. It was usual. You want a dollar figure on how much we made a night?
Sure.
I don't think I spent a paycheck that Jeff Palmer deposited into my account in probably 3 of the 4 years I worked there. Yep. I averaged about $150 to $300 a night in tips.
But you know what,
That's pretty good money.
You were personable. You were a great guy. You were attentive to the staff, to the artists, to the folks who were there, and that deserves some extra tips, I suppose, and some gratuity. Good for you, man. Seriously, and I remember that. I remember it very well.
I mean, $300 was, that was a Jeff Healey night. That was a Nazareth night. That was a Rick Santers night, Yeah. They weren't all like that, but I mean, I made good coin, at the end of the week.
In 1988, that's good money.
It was not, yeah, exactly. It was 1988. That was good money. Of course, on your night off, you'd go up to Rose's Cantina and get into the triple rum and cokes in a beer glass, and a lot of that money went right out the window again. But stupid is, stupid does. But yeah,
Al, listen, I want to thank you on behalf of Sean and I for being on the show tonight. It's a pleasure to talk to folks who were involved in the industry, who knew the industry in and out. Like, besides playing, you were actually you were serving the folks at the biggest bar in Halifax at the time. And we thank you for being on here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
And I want to say one thing, Al. When this shit's over, we're getting together for a beer, brother.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I'm up for it, man.
No, we'll do it. Thanks so much.
Al Gaudet.
My pleasure, guys. Peace, love, and grooviness, man.
Listen, be safe, bro.
Barstools